Welcome everybody to our Spanish Fork Planning Commission meeting tonight. I've asked Commissioner Cardin if he would lead us in the pledge.
All rise, please. Repeat the pledge after me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, our first agenda item is the approval of the minutes from June 2nd. And I would entertain a motion.
I make a motion that we approve the minutes from June 2nd.
Got a motion?
Second.
Got a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, our next agenda item is public hearing for conditional use permit. This is the cell tower modification on 1150 East, 2021.
Thank you. Mike, if you don't mind jumping to the PowerPoint. These next two items are very similar, both conditional use permits. Both are requesting co-location on existing towers. One is in the city-owned property just to the west of All Abilities Park. And so if you jump down one slide. Oh, sorry, the presentation. This cell tower already has an existing enclosure, and so there would be no visible changes to the bottom of the structure where the equipment goes. What we're seeing is up on the top of the structure, co-location, which we deem as favorable over having a new cell tower placed in a different part of the town. The second item, and we will need to hold public hearings and make separate motions on the items, but the second item is an existing tower in an industrial area that's kind of tucked behind the side of a building. And once again, co-location is desired over a new cell tower. Staff didn't see any issues with either of the items, but we'd be happy to answer any questions. And we'll give you a second to just kind of see. Jackson was kind enough to go out and did an inventory of all the cell towers in the city, and he's got some current pictures of each cell tower. And so I'll give you a quick second. If you haven't had a chance to look at the staff report, we'll pull that up.
Brandon, I have one question for you. These are coming before us just about every month. Are these upgrades, do you know, are these upgrades to 5G?
Not necessarily.
Or it's just upgrades to what's already there?
Most of the time, it's just upgrades to what's already there.
And they generally don't change in configuration or in height or width. They're just
Correct.
replacing the panels that extended, it seems to me.
Yeah, most of the time, it's just replacing of antennas already on the tower and then upgrading equipment at the base of the tower. And so these two are a little separate or different than the ordinary in the sense that we're co-locating and adding an additional set of antennas.
Okay. One other question that I have for you is that in the last year or so, since these have been coming to us, there was only one person who came in objection, and his objection was to the hours of work that was being performed on the tower. Mm-hmm. Does staff have anything that you give to these guys that tells them what hours of business or what hours they can conduct the construction on and stuff like that? Is it fairly standard?
It depends on the location. So if you recall, that tower was in the backyards. It was the interior park, whereas these two are kind of further away from the homes, and so that is a condition that we can add if the Planning Commission feels it'd be necessary. But we felt that these two locations wouldn't potentially pose a hazard or an issue, nuisance, if somebody was working on it, yeah. So this is the existing tower on 1150 East. You can see the hill for the All Abilities Park just behind it. Has the nice masonry wall. If we go a couple slides down, Mike. This is the other location. This is the end of 500 South, so just north of the school and I believe south of the ball field. So if we go to the next slide, this is the existing tower.
Brandon, when you see a cell tower in town, is each individual cell tower owned by a single company, or do they share towers? Do you know?
A lot of them are shared,
Are they? Okay.
and so quite a few of them, the city actually owns the property, and then there's a lease agreement. One company builds the tower and then usually leases out space for other providers to go on the tower.
By doing that, it prevents more cell towers from popping up all over town.
Exactly. Yep.
What would require that masonry fence around the one, but not this one?
Location,
Just location?
yeah. That one was more visible, and I would say it was probably 2014, 15-ish. It's been a number of years since the corner was upgraded with the substation, and I believe those improvements were made at that time.
I think we as the city installed that wall, not.
Not the lease. Okay.
The second one looks, is that Landmark parking lot?
Yes, just north of Landmark, by their gardens and greenhouses. Okay.
Any additional questions for staff? Thanks, Brandon.
Thank you.
All right, this is a public hearing, so we'll move into public hearing for the 1150 East 2021 cell tower. Is there anybody that would like to address us on this one? Seeing none, we will move out of public hearing. Anything additional with the other cell tower, Brandon? Okay, so let's move into public hearing for the 500 South 2021 cell tower. Anybody have any comments or want to say anything about that one? Seeing none, we will move out of public hearing. And does anyone have any additional comments? And if not, then I would entertain a motion on the first.
I move that the proposed conditional use permit for the cell tower modification on 1150 East 2021 South, North? Doesn't say East.
It's a year reference.
Oh, okay. 1150 East be approved contingent upon compliance with staff's findings and conditions.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Is this an approval or a recommendation?
Approval.
All right, and then with the other one, is there anyone that would like to make a motion for that one?
I move that we approve the proposed conditional use permit for the cell tower modification located at 251 West, 500 South, based on the findings and subject to conditions.
Got a motion
Second.
and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, next agenda item is preliminary plat for Swift Creek.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The subject property in this case is on the north side of US Highway 6, just west of 3400 East. That's the road that we can see just kind of on the left-hand side of the image here. That would be the right-hand side of the image.
It would be, yes.
Gather myself here real quick. So US Highway 6, 3400 East. There are a couple of other projects in the works in the area. D.R. Horton's going to be developing property right here. That's been called Quiet Valley. We have an application for what's being called the Johnson subdivision right here. I believe Fieldstone will be developing that. At the time of annexation, this property was zoned R115, and that's consistent with a portion of the property that'll be developed as Quiet Valley, and the project that we think Fieldstone will be doing just north of Quiet Valley, just to the east of this project here. The proposal here, well, maybe before I jump into that, I'll use the aerial to talk about a couple of other things. I think everybody on the commission's aware of the Baum family property right here. They're really the only neighbors in the immediate area. We've had several conversations with them about the development. We'll see just in a minute that the design of this project does allow for the prospect of this property developing in the future and having some different ways to access home sites should that property ever be developed. Rocky Mountain Power owns the property just north of them, and I think you very faintly can see lines that are indicative of a pretty large power corridor that cuts through this property. We'll also see in a minute the location of an access street that'll provide a second access to the development over to 3400 East. The applicants have been successful at relocating an easement in order to be able to construct that road. The easement is on, or is across, again, that property that Rocky Mountain Power owns there. Jackson, can you maybe jump to the next slide for us? Yeah, this here. So that's what I'm talking about there. So 2 points of access to the development here and here. A couple of stub streets planned to provide access for the future development of property to the north. This one here tying into this property to the east. As designed, the project has a couple of relatively long straight streets. We've taken a little bit of care relative to how those are laid out to plan for some different measures in the street to reduce the width of travel lanes and to try to slow down traffic. I didn't intend on saying this, but you're aware, for example, River Cove, maybe a similar situation that we have there, long straight street, wide street, very conducive to people feeling comfortable driving pretty quick in a residential setting where you have a lot of driveways, different things like that. Potential conflicts, and we are mindful of that, and we do try to do different things to reduce how comfortable a driver is driving fast on streets like this, and oftentimes just simply narrowing the travelway at intersections can be very effective at doing that, and that's basically what we're proposing be done here and here to just reduce the likelihood that people are going to be going faster than the residents would like on those streets. But for the most part, this is, I would say, a very straightforward design layout. It is proposed as a master plan development, which means that the applicants have stayed within both maximum density and an average lot size criteria that we have for master plan developments in the R115 zone. Many of the lots that we're seeing here are 15,000 square feet or larger. A few are a little bit smaller, some are much larger, but they are within those parameters that we have in Title 15 for projects like this.
You have the average, Dave?
15,793.
So almost 16. That's great.
Thanks, Brandon. And I guess maybe just the last thing I was going to mention, we are, as a community, we're running relatively low on projects like this. Our inventory, if we call it that, that's what we refer to it as, of projects we're looking forward developers are developing lots for single-family homes. It's gotten to be about as tight as it's ever been. And between this project, Quiet Valley, and what, again, Fieldstone's working on right now, if you believe that a certain kind of balanced growth is good for a community like Spanish Fork, I tend to think that it is. Having opportunities for this type of construction going forward, this particular type of development, if you think that's good for a community, then I think these are frankly pretty important projects going forward. You're aware of how many different projects the city has approved in recent years of different types, townhomes, condominiums, and the like, different things like that. In my mind, this is going to be particularly important for the next few years, just to help us, again, kind of maintain some balance to the way that the community is growing. And it's really good to see this type of development. It's consistent with the general plan. Will help promote some goals that were established several years ago when we created the estate density residential designation. But maybe enough of my commentary there. I'll just say that the Development Review Committee reviewed this in a couple of different meetings. Frankly, as we did our initial review, we missed something the need for a trail along the railroad tracks here, which is what you see on the south side of Ivory Homes development. Thinking to the west of Spanish Fork Parkway. If you can picture, for example, the townhomes that Salisbury built, and you've got an Ivory Homes development next to that, and a development that was constructed by Edge Homes next to that, where you can see from US Highway 6 the trail, black chain link fence between the trail and the railroad right-of-way. The applicants did go back and modify their plan to include that, and we certainly appreciate their working with the city to have that be part of the design. So the trail will continue from those developments that I just talked about. It'll cross 2550 East or Spanish Fork Parkway, go along the southern side of Holiday Oil, cross, I think, just one vacant parcel then between Holiday Oil and this location here, and tie into a system that'll most likely, I think, cross US Highway 6 here to work its way maybe in a couple of different directions, but perhaps ultimately down to the river bottoms, into the trails that we have over there. So again, I appreciate the applicant addressing that need with a revision, and the Development Review Committee has recommended that this be approved, subject to the applicant meeting a few conditions that we've spelled out in the staff report, which I think for the most part are pretty routine.
Is there access to the trail from this cul-de-sac as well?
There would be, so here and here, those would be the 2 points of access.
Is the trail just going to end right there, or is it going to go up to the road?
That's an older image. It'll go along right here.
Yeah.
Right there or right there? Oh, right there.
Yeah, along the
Not
road.
along the track. But
It goes down
connect.
into a decent sized hole, so you'd have to build, it'd be a pretty expensive trail. Then you have a hill off of one side. So we figure just bring it straight along the bottom and then go along with the road that does rise up and do them both together. So kind of wrap around like this.
One question is, are these lots going to be developed individually or by one developer?
Most likely one
developer.
And to go along with that, so phase one is on the east side there. And then, so does that include the homes on both sides of the street, east and west there? And then phase two will be the next one with east and west.
So both accesses are part of phase one?
Is there a better picture that shows us phase one and phase two?
And maybe we can just have the applicant come up at this point.
Yeah.
Question for Dave. Dave, does our ordinance require a certain variation of housing floor plans within certain distance of other similar or the same floor plans, or is that typically a developer-driven standard
Our ordinance does require that.
Good.
200 feet of separation in any direction.
from the same floor plan?
Correct.
Okay, great.
It looks to me like there's just one access to phase one.
Phase one's
Is that right?
lots.
Yeah.
So the north access?
Yeah, or the north. So just the north.
Pardon me, how many lots? I couldn't hear you.
30.
Thank you.
I think there's 30.
So the other road on the north would necessitate this access road being built. Is that right?
That would be built with phase one. This is actually, so the phase one line goes something like this. So this would be constructed with phase two.
Oh, so they're proposing to,
Yeah, so they would start here
wow.
and work their way that way.
so this is the road that will be built with phase one, the north road. Okay.
I'm still having a hard time seeing that phase one line.
Yeah,
Just trace that for us.
right like this,
Okay.
down to here and over. So it's that area right there.
Thank you.
Are street trees currently required for the ordinance?
Not currently. There's nothing to stop a developer from doing that.
I know that Mrs. Baum had expressed some concern about this area here, just with the irrigation ditch. Will they have to put a masonry fence there, or what would that include?
With these being single-family homes, there's no requirement for any kind of fencing necessarily.
Okay.
And there's no plan that they've presented that would,
Because her ditch runs here, and does it come up on the other side of the property as well?
expected John to ask about ditches. He didn't.
I was trying to take his spot today.
It was
Throwing them off.
Good job, Jesse. I think that ditch continues this way and then comes across here to water this property. This ditch does come along here and waters everything.
Just can't remember if it comes up.
I'd imagine you've already talked with East Bench Canal Company, and they've given you their,
Yeah, we're in the process, and you're right, that's the way the ditch flows. The water is running north, right along 3400 east. Yeah.
and this ditch on the south, this one, you'll have to do something with that to continue to water the bombs.
It is on the bomb property.
Come up here to the mic, they can't hear you.
That ditch on the south side of Bombs. Good evening, my name's Rob McNeil. The ditch on the south side of Bombs is on the bomb property. So it's not on our property.
And it doesn't come onto your property at all?
It does not come onto our
It
property.
turns and goes north?
Yep, it turns and runs north. And I've also talked to John Olson and to John Stewart. And so what happens is the ditch just runs right down 3400 east to the north border line there. Yep, between the Stewart Farm and Rocky Mountain Power, and then us right here. And it runs down and ends right there. And then there's a ditch that comes under the freeway right here. So according to John Olson, he actually gets his water on another ditch to the north. Okay, so that ditch that turns and runs west right there feeds John Stewart. And that ground right there, the girls' homes, they have an orchard there and a little hay farm there and little hay patch. And yeah, so.
One other thing on something someone else just asked is we've been discussing as a planning commission about having an ordinance where there's including street trees in the planter strips when a community is developed, that neighborhoods just look so much nicer when they have these beautiful uniform trees. Is that something that you'd be interested or
We haven't done it. Have we done it?
in adding?
We haven't yet. We don't. Yeah.
And it's not a requirement.
No, it's not a requirement, but
Just add it.
right. It's not a requirement, but it is something that is in the works and coming for requirements for Spanish Fork. So it is a beautiful thing, and it's something that you could be one of the first and a model that we could point at and say, look at this beautiful development that has trees to be coming in to begin with. We understand that it's an investment, but it's also an investment in our great community, so.
Yeah, that's true.
Does the city have a street tree ordinance, or is it just recommended trees at this point?
We have a list of permitted trees.
In park strips?
Yes, exactly. And particularly where now we have 8-foot park strips. It's pretty accommodating of a lot of different types of trees. The reception that we've had from most developers has been pretty warm, home builders, about the idea of during the course of some part of the construction of homes and the development, oftentimes it's just 1 or 2 trees, per lot, given how much frontage they do or don't have. So I think that's what Commissioner Warnick's referring to. We've talked about making that a requirement for different types of projects in the community. We're probably on the cusp right now of having that done in the next month or 2.
And oftentimes, if you've got a PRUD or you're
Something
doing
like that.
greater density, that's one of the amenities you might
Yeah.
negotiate to gain that. But here, we're just fitting within the standard zoning. But
You're not quite fitting within the
we've
standard
always put
zoning.
trees in
It's a
our-
master
our
plan development.
developments, but I think we'd have to see how that goes.
I think maybe
I'll just make it, I'm planning on making it a condition. I'm planning, you all can deny my motion if you want, but I was going to make it, add that as a condition of recommending approval.
which could be addressed as part of the final plat review. Typically, with a project like this, we wouldn't see a landscape plan required.
Yeah, but the point is, this is an administrative function.
Come up here to the mic.
Come up here to the microphone and just
Sure.
state your name.
Yeah.
I mean, presuming we would end up building the homes, you know, we've never built a subdivision that doesn't have trees in the park strips, but I think to impose it as a condition when we meet the zoning requirements would be imposing something that would be
So I think
illegal at this point.
Yeah, that's a good question. So you don't actually meet the zoning requirements. You have lots that are less than the minimum standard of lots for the R115 zone. The reason you're allowed to have lots that are smaller than 15,000 square feet is because you're applying under the master plan development exception. And under the master plan development application, conditions that are reasonable can be imposed upon you for approval. So you're not actually applying by right in the zone today. You're not. That plat doesn't meet the standard.
Can I provide a little history on that, just for some context for everybody's benefit?
And I'm fairly new in the discussion, but when you and I spoke, you told me it was an administrative proceeding at this point, which would imply if we've met the conditions, and I guess that's the issue. If there is a condition that can be imposed under the master plan or the ordinances, then certainly we would need to comply. But anyway,
So Joseph, I agree with you 100%, and Shauna as well, that I would love to see street trees, but personally, until it's required, part of our ordinance, I would suggest holding off and that we encourage the city to get moving on that.
And I think
That's where
also
I
just,
stand.
I kind of think that as well, and I think just a friendly saying to the developer, like, we're moving toward trees, we'd love street trees, it's great that you've done trees in the past, and that's wonderful, and yeah, that's my thought on it too.
and we appreciate the input. We're listening hard. So we want everyone to be happy. We just don't want to be constrained to do something if it's not
Required, right.
Does the city, or is it in CCNRs, require your front yards need to be finished by a certain amount of time, and you need to have a certain amount of trees in your yard? Where does that come into play?
We don't require trees, but we do require a certain type of finish to a yard within a certain time frame
And is it the
after
developer or the homeowner that meets that requirement?
home builder.
Home builder?
Yeah.
Okay.
Which oftentimes that requirement ends up getting passed on to the homeowner. That's given a certain amount of time to get that finished. In any event, when we issue a certificate of occupancy for a home where the front yard isn't landscaped, we keep a bond, we keep basically cash
Make
on
sure
hand
that-
as some type of an incentive for people to follow through and to get that done, and that's been pretty effective. We've had the system that we're using now, I want to say probably for 5 or 6 years now, and I think it's worked fairly well. There are outliers where we're still 4 and 5 years down the road and we don't have front yards in and that type of thing, and that becomes a challenge sometimes, but for the most part, I think it's working.
Do you want to speak to whether or not the plat meets the zoning standard?
100%.
By right?
100%, yes. Incidentally, up until probably 4 or 5 years ago, when we changed our landscaping requirements for the entire city, the requirement that we have in place now, citywide, only applied to master plan developments. So that used to be one difference between a master plan development and a standard subdivision, just simply that we required yards to be landscaped within a certain amount of time after the home was occupied. But everything that I've heard anybody say, I think is completely accurate. So to talk about the nature of what's being requested tonight and ultimately the latitude that the city council has to either approve a project as a master plan development or not, I think what Commissioner Ernest is saying is spot on, that the council does retain that discretion as to whether or not a project gets approved with setback deviations, lot size deviations, or any one of a number of other things that can be requested as part of a master plan development approval. And at the same time, I would consider this something of an administrative approval, and if there's any doubt but what, the city's obligated to approve the development. I think there is latitude in terms of requiring certain things to justify the approval, with those deviations. The history here, I think it's just worth considering. And I do, as staff, that missed something that was fairly significant on our initial review, the inclusion of this trail, which up until the time that this trail was added to the project, this was approvable as a standard subdivision. All of the lots meeting the minimum 15,000 square foot requirement and so forth, with the idea, I think, that these applicants did not want to subject themselves to any frills or any
To Commissioner Ernest, they didn't want to have to.
baggage that comes. I'm just giving the history there. Again, because I do feel, I regret that we didn't bring that to their attention earlier. So whether that's worth considering or not, I throw that out. But again, I think the different points that have been expressed are accurate. But if you'd like to make a recommendation that any conditions be included for the council to consider, that certainly is within your purview.
Is there a masonry wall right there on the backside of the trail
There will be a masonry wall,
or on the other?
the trail, and then a fence between the trail and the railroad right away.
So while we're talking about the trail, is this, so we talked about an access here. Is this also,
Looks like an
it
access.
looks like an access. Is that an access?
That's just an easement for irrigation ditch. So no one will view that any differently than any other yard space on a lot.
So it's part of 21?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. So I was going to suggest if it was, it's a ditch, so you can't move it, but I would have rather seen this pushed down, close that off, and put an access right here. Because anybody all the way over here, I guess they can go down to this cul-de-sac or down here, but it'd be nice to have them living where I do and having the accesses that we do. It's nice to not have to go all the way around the block to get to a trail.
We kicked that around quite a bit in the DRC meeting, and I think we were on the fence as to which way to go, and ultimately just left it as proposed here. But that's another thing, certainly, that's within your,
I know there's been lots of changes to this land and what we're doing. I know this area specifically has been, obviously it's not part of the plan tonight or the approval tonight. Do you have ideas of what you want to do with that or thoughts at this point?
We just decided to leave it off the future phase, and we'll just deal with it later. We want to just move forward with the 15,000 square foot lots. We haven't decided yet.
Okay.
So let me ask you as the developer, what are your thoughts on having an access right here? Cutting the size 13,000 down to 12 something and having another access point to the trail?
We did have that discussion in length, and I think part of that discussion was to widen the cul-de-sacs to 20 feet as part of making that wider there. I mean, we did widen both ends, east and west, to 20 feet to make those wider for wheelchairs or bikes or razors.
The width was for
I'm just-
maintenance of the Parks and Rec.
Yeah.
So the
Oh, on the
discussion
trail?
for the mid-block was more of comfort and safety on the trail
Yeah.
versus accessing it just from the ends.
Okay.
We had a discussion that, but don't remember. We just kind of agreed to do in the end.
people on the DRC felt like it wasn't necessary or beneficial than what felt like it was, and that is kind of the idea that just carried the day.
Okay.
If it were to be done, rather than to maybe reduce one lot by 20 feet of width, typically we'd
Reduce the
see,
ends.
over 10 lots, just those made 2 feet narrower, and that's how you get, to having a 20-foot path. So it wouldn't have a significant impact.
Another option we've done in River Point and stuff is the either end could be something that is a 25 or, a big one for trucks. Maybe this one is just a 10-foot, quite a bit narrower just for the pedestrian use. Because our typical trail width is 10 feet, maybe a little shoulder on the side. The ends we did 25, maybe the center one could be something less significant. But again, DRC was split. Some people say it is more accessible, but if you're going for a run, get some more steps in and go to the end. We had a varying level of discussion. This one is pretty, there's two of them right next to each other. One here, they're close, but there isn't, the end ones for this one. For this one, it's the whole length is basically accessible, but there is a trail right here on the edge, and then this parking lot area.
Could be motivation to get your 10,000 steps in.
Close those rings.
So,
Okay. Thank you for the input.
Is this not a public hearing, this one?
This is not.
With the DRC feeling the way that they did, what do we feel? Because I would contend that it makes sense to have that in the middle so that people can get there. And it's especially what Mike is saying, just doing something smaller that people can access. Because you're just going to have, it is a fair distance from one side to another, but it's, I don't know. I would think that it'd be helpful to have that trail entrance there.
If I lived in that neighborhood, I would want the access. Not living in,
Have an access standard? We don't.
not living in the neighborhood, it doesn't matter. But if that were my neighborhood and I lived there, especially if I lived in any of these middle ones or even up here.
well, no, the only similar idea, and I don't know if this is a correct application, this isn't a trail per se, but this block length was too long. This is Maple Mountain High School. So there is a walkway. So if this kid wants to get to school, he doesn't have to, truck all the way around or go a different direction. There is a,
And that.
and this one too.
I like that. Yeah.
Try to cut the block down for pedestrians.
You have a little trail that
Little
goes over
different
to
story.
View Elementary School. There's a little trail that
Spanish
goes through for Spanish Oaks.
Are there any safety concerns for those narrow accesses? Did you say safety? Sorry, what? Brandon probably knows what it is. Through environmental design. Yeah, it speaks to the safety when you have kind of a narrow corridor with fences on both sides,
Hidden spaces.
things like that.
That's what I was thinking about.
That's why we started going with 20-foot wide instead of 10. Got a little bit more room for that very purpose, just providing a little bit less of a tight corridor kind of a feel.
I was worried about that too. The tunnel at Fieldstone, the tunnel, it's graffitied like crazy. There's graffiti everywhere.
It's called CEPTED, Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design.
There's
A lot
another
of
one.
times you see it implemented with businesses and things that, keep parking lots open and lit and windows on the street, that kind of crime prevention.
How wide is that one?
I don't know. That one's by my house.
We'll call that 10.
It's pretty narrow.
Yeah, versus the other ones that have some landscaping on the side in addition to a 10-foot wide path, just to.
And it's 131 feet. It's 131 feet.
131 feet front to back.
12.
Yeah,
kinda-
honestly, I'm fine either way.
Tell from the
I mean, if they
I almost want to
take the sidewalk down to the cul-de-sac, then it's really no different, I guess, than if they cut through, but.
I think of lights as well, because I was worried about that safety concern, a narrow corridor with 6-foot fences and my kids walking on it.
Yeah.
So that's why I kind of was against it. I'm more in favor of street trees for what it's worth, but
What if we've made a corridor of street trees?
doesn't help.
No? Okay.
You have drills.
Actually make it worse.
All right, any other comments or discussion on this? If not, I would entertain a motion.
I move that the Planning Commission recommends approval of the preliminary plat based upon compliance with staff's findings and conditions. And I'll add one condition that the applicant includes trees in each of the park strips as approved by staff.
Got a motion? Okay, don't see a second, so that motion fails. Any additional discussion?
I guess just the question is it'd be interesting to hear what it would be nice to just put a note in, not a requirement or a condition, but just a note to bring it up with when you bring this before the city council, to see if they have strong feelings about it.
So you say you do developments with trees in the strips, right? Is this your plan? Do you have any plans to do any trees at all in this development? As the builders? No. Okay.
No, it was looked at as a standard subdivision. When we've done street trees in other developments, they've been, full master plan developments with common area, parks, trails, and so forth, so.
And part of the issue, we came into this thinking there would be some other.
Do you mind coming
Sure.
coming up for us? Thank you.
We came into this from the outset thinking there would be some other zoning possibilities available as part of the approval, particularly given the land down by the railroad tracks. And when you can have a little more density, it gives you more options to do some of those other things. And so our reluctance to say we want to commit to do this, and this is we're not completely sure right now whether we'll end up building this project ourselves or if somebody else will build it. We're very confident that it will be a one-builder project, but whether that will be us or somebody else, we're not completely sure what we'll do with it at this point, and that's our hesitancy for wanting to speak for somebody else here tonight. That when you have lumber prices that went up 100% in 30 days in the spring, and it's easy to say there's room to do all these things. It's really tight right now, even though everyone thinks the market is robust. It is, but the prices, the margins are really being squeezed. And so we just want to be careful in terms of when we view this as a standard development to start imposing things that if it's something that can be, we want to do what's required, but we don't want to impose things that are not necessarily part of what should be imposed with a pretty standard subdivision.
Right. You can also see that the people that are going to be buying these lots, they're estate density size lots, and so to have it's not in the requirements right now. That's true, but to be thinking about if you have a higher density, you want to create a neighborhood kind of feel. You want to have this beautiful amenities. Well, in a neighborhood where you're going to have a lot of really nice homes, wouldn't it make sense to also do that? I can see how your margins are difficult, but these are going to be really nice homes where people are going to spend a lot too. So.
And I would think that to some extent, because of that, some of these ideas will take care of themselves. I mean, if I'm building a home in here and, I'm personally going to want a couple of trees out in the parking strip. And if my home price, bears that, then it's usually part of the landscaping package I'll do. And I would really suspect that that's what we'll end up seeing here. I really do.
So I think it's also important that we as a planning commission / the city, if we feel strongly about trees being in the parking strips, that we move forward with trying to make that happen as a requirement and moving forward. Because I think last time we were here in planning commission, we talked about something similar but different about tying hands when there's not something in place as of yet. And I think that's important as well.
It is.
But you guys were going to require an alley, and for the same legal reasons you could require an alleyway to the trails, the same reasons you could require streets.
So my hesitancy.
And it's MPDs, we require masonry walls frequently. It's an MPD. I don't want you guys to confuse what you can and can't do.
We could add conditions.
That's all I'm getting at.
My hesitancy with the trees is I still have too many questions.
I made it conditional on staff approval. Staff would have to.
But when a developer comes in and does a townhome, they're doing everything. They're doing the landscaping and everything. I worry about putting trees in a park strip where the homeowners are responsible for putting in the irrigation and the sprinkling system. What's the timeline on that? Is the developer going to put the trees in before the homeowner gets the sprinkling system in and then the trees just die? I just have too many questions still that need to be answered before I can agree
I
to.
just punted to staff on all of that, just like they did on Fieldstone, just like the Fieldstone development.
Right.
And the park strips that have been going in. The
Dave,
trees are alive, so just so you know.
Dave, this is a preliminary plat approval. Can the tree issue be taken up upon final plat approval?
Yeah,
I mean, we don't have anything as far as
it doesn't matter.
elevations of the houses or, they're not asking for anything special as far as setbacks, anything like that. This is a preliminary plat. I think that the preliminary
And we're just the
plat-
recommending body.
Right.
So I just wanted to make sure that it's clear, I recommend that there's street trees.
Yeah, and I think I think I support having the trees be put in, because when I built, one of the requirements was a tree of a certain diameter had to be planted in the front yard. Cost me a few $100 to put in the kind of tree I wanted. If the cost of my home goes up $300 because they put 2 trees in the park strip, I don't see that as a huge issue. I understand that there are restrictions on the developer, or not restrictions, but there are constraints that their profit margin may be reduced. But by that same token, that happens with everything that we do. In construction, everything you do has to be paid for, and it's generally paid for with the cost of the house of the person who is taking the loan out on the finished product, not so much the developer. When lumber went up, I don't know, geez, the cost of building that house went up and everybody went back to the bank. The developer wasn't on the line for that. And there were all kinds of horror stories on the 10 o'clock news about these different huge developers that were throwing these things out, that you're going to have to come up with a bunch more money and all of this stuff to cover those costs. And so I don't know that the cost is what we're talking about. What we're talking about is just what do we want to see developed? What do we want to see in a development? Is it the trees? If it's the trees, then go forward with it. I know it's been discussed by staff because we've discussed it a number of times in these meetings. I know it's been discussed with the city council, and they can go ahead and remove the trees if they want, if we approve it with the trees. But by the same token, would it be with our recommendation? We're recommending this to the city council, so part of the recommendation is Joseph's recommendation is for trees.
That's right.
They can strip it back out.
Yeah, so we can recommend, but not
And
require.
I would want to be clear as well. I wouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's great development. Looks great. Thank you for bringing it. Seriously, that's
And I
great.
like their
But
patience.
I think it should have trees, and I don't think it's unreasonable to require them. So that's why I made the motion I did.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
Right, and maybe just a couple of thoughts. First of all, the commission, in this case, doesn't require anything.
That's
The
right.
person involved is right. You're just making a recommendation. So it would be a recommendation to require street trees.
Right.
We don't mean to state the obvious there, but a couple of other thoughts that I've had as this has been discussed. This is a good time, I think, maybe to talk about what happens when properties get zoned certain ways. This is unique in that it's a proposed preliminary plat that's coming to you as a proposed preliminary plat, standalone without a zone change.
That's a big deal.
90% plus of the times when we've brought residential development proposals to you in the past, they've been accompanied by a zone change, legislative act, not administrative act. Therefore, the city council has all kinds of discretion. Ultimately, you have all kinds of discretion in making a recommendation relative to the legislative act of changing the zoning of a property to accommodate a development proposal. that the city council wanted to require street trees as part of a development approval tied to a zone change. No question about that. Certainly within the discretion that I think courts have very customarily given to legislative bodies when they're making decisions like that. This is a little bit different in that the zoning's in place and certain rights come with the zoning. So if a developer proposes a project that meets our standards,
Does that meet the R115 zoning standards?
We've covered that, but I'll reiterate.
Okay, I just think you might be misleading the group a little bit so far.
I'm saying if an applicant proposes a development that's consistent with the underlying zoning, standard development that's consistent with underlying zoning, there's no question it gets approved. Shouldn't even be any discussion,
come to us,
right?
right?
Automatic slam dunk, administrative, done. In this case, it is a little bit different. Our master plan development program is intended to facilitate development without a question, but, and we could pull up the language, last paragraph of the master plan development section of the code clearly gives the city council the latitude to either approve a project as a master plan development or to require a developer to go back and redesign it to meet the underlying zoning standards, all of them, including lot size. And not that he's asking for credit, but to give credit where it's due, just like Commissioner Ernest is saying. This project does not meet all of those standards. The only thing that I've interjected to that, I'll say it again, is that I think they came at this with that intent, and but for a trail, they'd be there, which for me is worth considering. It may or may not be for you, and that's totally up for you guys to decide. And I'm absolutely comfortable with whatever you want to do with that. But relative to you looking at this is not a standard project. It is a master plan development. And if you want to make a recommendation to the city council to require any particular thing, that's for them then, to consider and to weigh and to impose or not.
But to that thought, go ahead, Mike.
Sorry, I was just thinking, because there are issues cost. So if you did $300 a tree, 2 trees per lot, that's 166 trees, and we give $300, it's 50 grand. If they're already having to do a master plan development, what if on this street, for example, you made all of these 13,000 square feet or 12,000 square foot lots, and you put another lot in?
Or 2. They have enough square footage.
Or 2. I'm seeing whatever the average is it's over 15,000. They're 15,700 something. If you got another lot in there.
I'm not in love with the trees to that extent. I just think it's a good idea.
I still don't know if you'll find one. You won't notice one.
I'm actually surprised we've talked about the trees for this long. I thought it was going to be really easy.
You made a motion with trees.
I think the city wanted trees from the get-go.
2 more lots, we'll agree to trees.
One question that Commissioner Mendenhall brought up is that there is going to be another plot approval that comes to us. At that point, if we felt strongly about trees, can you add them at that point?
There will not be
Not the planning
another.
Okay.
Yeah, so
we get one bite at our recommendation.
I just wanted to make sure that was
and maybe just to finish up on that thought, the final plat application is 100% administrative.
Right.
If they make an application with construction plans and everything like that that meets our standards,
Yeah.
case closed, cut and dry, it gets approved, no debate.
Does a development like this come with a landscape plan?
No.
So
Yeah.
because it's the home builders that typically do their own landscaping, the builders aren't required to submit a landscape plan.
I can't think of a time when we've seen a landscaping plan for single-family homes on individual
If they
lots.
back a collector road.
Yeah, but then it's just for the
Any
collector road.
common area.
That's what
Right,
we see,
right.
yeah.
Just common area, right?
So
There are some
they-
projects,
They'd provide one, say out, well, this even, you wouldn't even have it out here. So, no, not on this
So
one.
when could we have a meeting or continue discussion on trees in the planters?
I would suggest that by your next meeting, the Development Review Committee consider some proposed language so it becomes pending legislation and potentially something that the council could impose upon a developer if they make application after the date at which that's discussed in a public meeting like the Development Review Committee meeting, and that we have that done before your next meeting so that in your next meeting, we can talk about draft language. I can think of a few different options probably that we'd want to talk about. The one that I brought up might have just been last week at the end of a work session, and a couple of others that would go quite a bit farther in terms of making sure that this issue of street trees gets handled however the city council ultimately want it handled.
But that's an ongoing thing too, and there's been pushback on some of that stuff over the past few years. We started talking about this 3 years ago, and it's been brought up in this setting and in city council. And I don't know that they were ready to make that decision then. This does one of two things. Either Joseph makes his motion, and that's the catalyst.
I already did make the motion.
You can make it again, or you can bring it back up. But that kind of a motion is the catalyst to decide what's going to happen with the trees.
So that's different. So what Kevin is asking for is different. That's an amendment to zoning, right? So that's if this plat came in and they were actually abiding by the all of the zoning standards, then they would by default, they'd also have to abide by a future part of the zone, which would include street trees. In this case, as you know, they're not in compliance with the minimum lot size in the zone. Therefore, their plat is not approved by right, and we can absolutely apply conditions that have a reasonable basis.
Which I agree that it's something we're talking about doing in the future anyways. I just have too many questions at this point, not knowing what our future plan is going to be but you're saying.
But as long as you understand the context, yeah.
And you're saying
decision's
open it
yours.
up to staff, meaning, I don't know, it's kind of pushing staff to have to make a decision sooner than later, isn't it?
Also, city
not in
council.
NPDs. They could never change the zone. It doesn't matter. We could never talk about street trees. We could never add it to the zone. It doesn't change a thing. Same thing when we impose walls next to residences or a wall next to the playground when it's an NPD. It's the same type of thing. It doesn't have to be codified. As long as it's an NPD and the condition makes sense and is reasonable, there's no problem.
May I just offer one other food for thought as you're trying to consider how to make your recommendation and how to frame it? So I'll disclose I'm an attorney who's practiced for 30 years. I'm starting to get old now, I'm afraid, when I have to say that. But what I think about, and it goes beyond just the greedy developer that wants to squeeze every dime. When I hear something that says some number to be determined by somebody else, part of a concern that I would have is if this gets sold in a way that there's a builder who's doing custom homes for all of these different people, you're going to end up having a problem for city with code enforcement that's going to have to go out and look at each lot and determine, how many trees should we have here and have they done it and go back and check. It's just a much different situation than what is our traditional development where we go in and we have an HOA and we're going to enforce it as the developer, as the builder, and it's going to come as a package for everybody, and that's just part of what the package is going to be. And I'm not here to represent the city staff, but I think to have something that's vague and ambiguous as part of a recommendation does create headaches for both parties, and that's part of what I'm thinking about when I say if it's a more standard subdivision, should we be imposing those kinds of conditions that will be long-lasting? But I think, I've probably worn out my welcome in terms of, but.
I think it's great to give your perspective. Thank you.
We'd be up to the challenge.
I think my thought on it is just this one more thing is if we do recommend that the city council adds street trees as a condition, then that shows that we are serious about it and that it will move it down the road a little bit faster. And have real conversations, because the city, we could recommend it and city council could be like, we're not ready to do that yet if there's not an ordinance. Or let's get the ordinance in place and then.
The motion was we're 2 trees in the parking strip, right? Is that what you had said?
No,
What was the exact
It is
motion?
that the applicant includes trees in each of the park strips as approved by staff. I trust staff. We have plenty of developments in the city of Spanish Fork that have street trees in the park strips. That's it. That's all I'll say. You guys, I'm good either way. It's a great development. I don't think it's that big of a deal to require street trees. We do it all the time. As far as cost, I'm empathetic. If they came in here with an average lot size of 15,300, I think we probably would have approved it just the same as 15,857 or whatever it was. So they could always come back if they wanted to do that, or I'm not sure if they would want
What would
to.
you, I mean, to maybe just explore that a little bit further. What would, I mean, Indy, I think you've expressed your thought about that, but
I don't need to
our
be
code
right.
is.
You guys don't have to agree with me. That's why I made the motion the way
But I
did.
think it's an
You
important
don't need to
conversation
agree
we've been
with me.
trying to have that's kind of pushing the envelope a little bit and putting it in a different perspective. And so I think that it's a good discussion, whether or not you're sold to it, right? I think is, food for thought.
I kind of think, yeah, go ahead. No, you go.
I'm speaking specifically to the number of lots that they have. I mean, part of the spirit of the master plan development absolutely is that there's give and take. So if they went, to your point, from an average lot size of 15,000, almost 800 to 15,300,
I think we'd be
honestly
just
don't
as
think that
happy.
anybody driving down any of these streets ever in the future would notice that there's an additional home in the development, for that matter, or 2.
It'd be another family or 2 in Spanish Fork. It'd be great.
That's the
We
gift
welcome them.
that makes it worth adding what likely would be 2, in some cases 3 street trees per lot. And if that's something that,
I would go along with that.
I'm comfortable with that.
If we're still above the average, which we put in play.
Which
You guys really have to
not
like
negotiable.
trees to do
I
that.
really like trees.
I don't know if you like them that much. I don't know.
I do. But I also like that the average will be greater than.
So long as the average stays above what the requirement is.
large lots compared to most of what.
Yes,
you
they
see.
are.
Yeah, because you have a 22,
Right.
over
so
here,
like
number
you could
69. You have some pretty big
Square these
lots.
off. I mean, that's 40,000 square feet. You get quite a few lots in.
Those are in future phases, both of them.
Yeah. And you could do this similar idea.
Or they can do it on the north row of lots or the south row of lots.
Yeah, these ones don't have quite as wide a frontage to eat up. Be right, and you can do it anywhere.
Whatever orientation.
Like this big old.
We would support and stipulate if we could add a couple of lots, we would agree to a condition of 2 trees per lot in the subdivision.
Done.
That sounds like we've got some wheeling and dealing going. I like it.
How do you feel?
So how do we address this then? Do they need to resubmit a plan showing what the new lot sizes are gonna be?
I would suggest that, this is my suggestion on that. I would simply prefer probably at this point, if you just make a recommendation that the project be approved, potentially with additional density, in as much as the project still
Still above
cannot
15.
go above the.
Complies with the underlying zone
Hey, thank you, that's a really, just
as a master
complies
plan,
with the
but a master plan development overlay, this essentially.
requirements of that, exactly. And let them decide how to fit that density in prior to the project being presented to the city council.
Okay, I like it.
Did you guys want to bring up, were you going to bring up the clubhouse and the pool? Kevin, I know you talked about that earlier. Were you just waiting?
What about the
I'm just kidding.
About the ice skating rink.
Now that we got the trees, are we going to now talk about
Pickleball
the real
court.
thing that we were going to talk about?
If we could move it along tonight without, we would be very grateful, and here's the reason. We're now going to be into the end of July, and we will get to where we're having weather constraints on trying to get lateral improvements going, so.
Do you think you could have a new preliminary plat drawn up before this goes to the city council?
Next week.
because there's only one council meeting this
And it's next week, right?
It's a week from now.
Yeah,
They should be able to.
Week from yesterday.
if we could approve it subject to, that type of
Meeting.
constraint, then when we present final,
It'll
we
be
could
there.
present it with,
You comfortable with that, Dan?
The council's going to want to see the design with the number of lots that they'd be approving. I just leave that up to them to turn that around and get it submitted, and we take it to the council when.
And the council may hate it,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's still just a recommendation, absolutely.
as long as,
May want to go back to this without the trees.
Shouldn't take the engineer more than.
Yep.
we think we could, I can't speak for the engineer, but we think we could have something prepared for the council meeting, so.
They're working with a great engineer.
Okay, Joseph, try again.
Commissioner, or
this,
let's go
for the
try
record,
that
this will be the
second
second time that you guys have ghosted a motion and then asked me to redo the motion.
time. We just know you know the legal stuff.
All right, I move.
Confidence for it.
There'll be a little extra money in your check next.
Service. I like service. I move that the Planning Commission recommends to the City Council the preliminary plat be approved, subject to staff's findings and conditions, with the following conditions applied by Planning Commission, which is that the applicant includes trees in each of the park strips. The intent is to have 2 trees per lot, or as approved by staff on the distance between trees. In addition, that the applicant can add up to 2 more lots, yet needs to comply with the underlying zone with a master plan development designation.
I second
Second.
that motion.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Well done, Joseph.
Well done, Commission. We'll see.
Yeah, no, that was good.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
All
no.
for the trees. We do it all for the trees.
All for the
First time
trees.
here tonight with this planning commission. Thank you so much for having a nice discussion. We don't always see that.
That's true. The city is unique in that way.
It's important to us to have discussions.
Us too. We want it to feel like a collaboration, so
Yeah.
we appreciate it.
That'll be good.
Appreciate you.
Yeah.
Luck, guys.
You guys.
We're looking forward to this one. Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Dave, with that being said, is that still possible to have the DRC put some language together about the trees to get things ready for August?
This is just emphasized to me how important it is for you,
Yeah.
which that's, unless you tell me otherwise at this point, that'll be on your
Thank you.
agenda next month.
You
When I
did
think-
catch that it can be more than 2. I'm imagining I'm imagining a lot that has 400 feet of frontage on the corner and has 2 trees, like, oh, that doesn't look good.
I see some lots.
Well, in the corners, kind of.
So
I'm glad that you added the 2 homes, or the 2 lots.
up to 2,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
On some lots, you can only accommodate 1, I'm sure of that too, so.
Right on.
A little bit of.
Yeah, like lot 17, you might have 0 trees because
Driveway.
you have a driveway and it's not
That's
super
right.
wide and.
But I think it's important these discussions get pushed forward, right? We've been talking about trees. John said he's been talking about it for 3 years, so we're getting it moving. So
And I think the other thing too, maybe we should have said before, is like, we're saying you can add lots in good faith that it'll be reasonable. But I guess by saying it fits in what it.
Yeah, as long as we're above the 15 average, then it's a win-win.
Trees, trees, trees.
It makes a difference, without a doubt.
Dave is grinning from ear to ear because you've been pushing this ever since I got on the commission.
Been kind of slapped around a little bit over it. Going
Quite a
back.
bit.
I got to go back a long time. The last time we got a hard no.
As you look at these.
This is a
I
great
appreciate
perspective.
you bringing up these.
So A and B. So this is Ivory Homes, Spanish Highlands.
Yes.
A, and well, let me go up just, oh, come on, Google.
you just go up the street 20
There you
feet.
Excepting these guys, 0 trees till you get to the Ivory Homes at the other end that actually have them on it versus this one. So I run from my neighborhood, which is north of this one,
Liar, you walk most of the time.
Now,
It's true. I can make about half a
No.
block.
See? Told
Anyway,
you.
if I run through both of them, and it is a different feeling from one to the other one. And you drive slower too.
Having said that, though, I want you to realize that when I built my home where it is, I hired an architect to come out and take a look at the lot and design the lot to accommodate my view. And the only thing a tree does is block my view. Seriously. You know, I want to see those mountains. There was one place I could plant a tree, and it was required that I had to plant one tree, and I put it in front of the garage windows. It works, but if you make me put 2 or 3 trees in my, I don't have a park strip, so I guess I'm exempt. But what I'm telling you is that when you start throwing things out like this and say you must, you must, you must, there may be some people that say, I can't stand those trees. I would rather have a flowering plum. You know, why are you telling me that I only have these 3 choices? And that's what we've talked about in the past, is maybe having 3 to 4 choices that you can do. And that gets a little bit overbearing to me, because I am on the other side of things, and my neighbors have the same kind of an issue. We have very few trees along my street.
Now, your development,
Well, you're probably trying to protect a view, but I like this perspective because we might need to be careful when we add it to an actual zoning code. If you keep it as an MPD where we just consider it per time. In this case, it was clearly obvious that it was going to be better with it because it's just all houses. There's no elevation change. It's flat.
exactly what-
You know,
that's what I'm saying.
but I like that.
But you have to be a little careful.
We need to have the discussion too of, do you want the same tree down the entire street? Do you
No,
want
that's why I said
variety?
staff.
What do you want to do?
Yeah,
So
staff.
that- Something else, but you see some. that
I'd
may
like to
just
see palm
be
trees, Kevin.
street Based on the trees that are planted on the street, and it looks,
classic,
and it looks
right?
good.
That is,
Kevin, I should have said palm trees.
Palm trees.
Missed
That would
opportunity.
have been fun to see.
But your neighborhood is beautiful with the trees that are there, and
The ones
everybody
that are
made-
alive.
Yeah, the ones that are alive. That's true. But, you know, everybody made their own choice on what kind of tree they
So
want.
when we moved into our home 10+ years ago, my wife said, because the neighbors across the street put trees in. They were small at the time, they're big now, and they look great. But my wife said, I don't want trees in our planter because I want to be able to see our house when we pull up. It was a new house, she liked the way it looked, and so she wanted it to be open and visible and whatever else. Next spring, I'm hoping to rip out the grass in the planter and put some trees in. And so things change over time, but everybody's got a different way they want to look at it.
but giving people options, right?
Getting options, but when you zone it, you remove that option.
That's all I'm saying.
I like putting it in the master plan development. I also think it looks better on a road if you have the same tree all on the same, going down a road. You can turn the corner and go to a different kind of tree, but I,
This is the discussion that we've
come
had.
that's my opinion.
Of course.
That's my opinion.
everybody has opinions, right?
Yeah.
But in this case, there's really only one correct answer, and it's limiting options so that you get this. You get a certain amount of uniformity, both in terms of the species. Part of the beauty of this as well is that all of these trees probably were planted within a year of one another, and you've got relatively uniform spacing, which there are things about human beings and our minds that are attracted to some of this kind of symmetry and repetition and that sort of a thing. That's not to say that every street in the development has the same type of tree, but maybe there's not one type of tree throughout the whole development. You know, maybe you mix them up from one street to the next and different things like that. You know, I'm tipping my hand, but I really do think that we don't need to invent the wheel here. I think American communities did that 100+ years ago, and just following models that we can see now where mature neighborhoods have evolved with great street trees. They're highly valued places in most communities when you have that. And that's, again, I don't think we have to start from scratch at all to get to the right place. Without a doubt, every potential argument and complaint that anybody's mentioned today about limiting choice and that type of thing, we've heard it before.
we'll hear it again. So it's just a matter of what, as a community, is weighed as being, the most important thing, the most highly valued priority.
And another thing that we have to be aware of as we discuss these things is that we don't live back east or in the northwest where you can plant a fingernail and it grows.
It's true.
We kill trees like crazy in the west for different reasons. We can kill them as fast with too much water as we can with too little water. And then we get a bug in them and all of a sudden you get the whole neighborhood dying. And we're more susceptible to that because of the climate that we live in. And so it's really important that as we consider what different kinds of species we do, they're conducive to Utah and to a 17-year drought.
So things worked out tonight because they came with a plan that gave them leverage to still reduce density and meet the requirement. So if you get somebody that comes in and they're already at the bare bottom, this isn't going to be an option for them.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Probably one of the next subdivisions that you'll see will be the one I mentioned, Fieldstones. It's just right across the road. I believe that's zoned R115 already, right?
Yes, it is.
So that one will be similar to this, to where if they meet the density provisions and they propose it as a standard subdivision, that gets approved. And there's no opportunity, like Commissioner Ernest said several times, by right, that gets approved. There's no opportunity to impose any additional requirements on them. But for the most part, again, you're going to see the zone change, which, whether it's a master plan development or a standard subdivision, that's what provides some latitude to require different things.
Which is the reason we put the average in to begin with.
Yes, but you're absolutely right.
This sets the stage, though, right? This sets the stage for other developers to come in and see how it can work in their favor, and also, well, not necessarily in their favor, but there can be some give and take in the process that we want certain plans, certain things to be happening, but yet there has to be some compromise in that.
Because of the vision that we have for the plan and development and beauty of the city.
I was okay requiring the trees and not increasing the density, but yeah, both ways are good.
Well, I appreciate Joseph, I appreciate your
tenacity.
Yes, and you bring up valid points that are hard to argue with, and the developers, I think, kind of realize that there's, a little give and take here, and they worked out well.
Thank you.
The fact that they hadn't proposed at their maximum density, right? That's what you're saying. That's what.
Yeah. Gave them the option. Gave us the option.
Okay.
Right.
All right, moving on. Agenda item number 4, Title 15 amendments.
We have a couple of changes here from what was presented to you in your last meeting, but a lot of this is being redone so that we could hit all of the right notice requirements. I'm going to just touch on each of the changes. I think that's the easiest way to go through it. And feel free to stop me as we go through with any questions that you might have. First of all, in the definitions section of the code, agri-attainment, we talked about that, corn mazes, whatever the case might be, petting zoos, different things that farmers sometimes do, maybe just generate income or to supplement income, different things like that. Defining that as a use, defining feedlot as a use. There we see on the next page, that relative to how we're dealing with, also shown on that same page, or we're proposing that the city deal with the meat processing facility use becomes important to give us the ability to say yes to one and expressly no to the other. But I think those definitions largely speak for themselves. We can talk about horses if you want to or not. Grain mill, same thing, defining that as a use. We have some, I would say, legacy land uses in the community that we can regulate better and hopefully help to perpetuate better by defining that as a land use. So those are the proposed changes to the definitions. And you can see in the permitted uses, for example, in our agricultural zones, adding agri-attainment and adding the grain mill to that onto the third page there. That kind of rounds out changes related to the agricultural zones and the like. Mike, can you go down to the third page? Just you can see those there. Then kind of shifting gears for a second, financial institutions, that's an already defined use. So clarifying what I think was already understood, at least as I would have applied the zoning code. But for the benefit of some people that are concerned about having this expressly listed as a permitted use, adding financial institutions as a permitted use to both the general commercial and the shopping center zoning districts. So those are the two changes that we have on pages, the remainder, I guess I'd say, of page 3 and page 4.
It's a smart change. I like that change.
Really just correcting then what I think is an omission with adding development standards and site plan design review language there to the bottom of page 5. Then we kind of go back to.
It's like it's listed twice, we need to make sure we delete one of them.
We delete one of those, thank you. Then with permitted uses, making it clear that in our light industrial zone, so right now, we essentially allow any kind of agricultural uses in our light industrial zone. Making it clear that those uses are allowed, but what we've defined as a feedlot is not allowed, I think is a healthy and helpful suggestion. Not that we have anybody knocking on our door that might want to do a feedlot, but maybe an ounce of prevention there. The other aspect, meat processing facilities. This is the one that got quite a bit of airtime in your meeting last month. Defining that, the definition of this hasn't changed from what was presented before, and that does expressly preclude the connection of a feedlot with a meat processing facility. And not to go through everything that we talked about before, but, and I'll just speak for myself, in my view, really it's oftentimes having meat packing plants and the like connected to what often is a really, really large stockyard, feed yard, something like that. It's the stockyard or the feed yard that indeed becomes a very obnoxious thing to have in a community. So drawing a very bright line between those two uses and saying no to a feedlot, and then having also as part of how the meat processing facility would be added to the light industrial zone, that being as a conditional use with the language that stipulates a maximum size, which would be 20 acres, and a maximum kind of scale of the operation being addressed by a number of animals that could be processed in a 24-hour period of time. Again, distinguishing between a meat processing facility with no feedlot, which is how this would have to be, and maybe allowing for something else. Those seem to be very important criteria to employ to make sure that this is not any different than any other concrete tilt-up building that we might have in our light industrial zone. That's the goal, to keep it to just that, no more noticeable, not obnoxious or off-putting in any way. And then the last change, this is a relatively new add. I don't know if I'd call this an oversight, just something that maybe we weren't mindful of when we created the development enhancement overlay. A few years ago, we did not include the shopping center zone as a zone where that overlay potentially could be employed. I recommend that the council add that now, should it ever be a desired option for anybody in the future. So there are those proposed changes to Title 15. Again, most of that was already covered in your meeting. And then without having anybody from our legal office here to talk to, the other changes that we have that really have to do with the city's approach to code enforcement. A number of the changes that are there in Mr. Bird's memorandum that he's provided are not included in Title 15. And in as much as that's the case, typically they would not come to the Planning Commission for a recommendation. There wouldn't be a public hearing on those. But because they are kind of lumped together with some changes to Title 15, as we can start to read there on page 8 of Mr. Bird's memorandum, there is a need to have a public hearing with both the Planning Commission and City Council to consider those changes. I'm going to really paraphrase, and we can get into as much detail on this as you want, but we certainly have many opportunities to do a better job of making sure that nuisances and different things of that nature are not perpetuated throughout the community. I think particularly in residential neighborhoods in the community, upping our game in terms of code enforcement and how those things are dealt with so that we actually do see positive change and that we see it with some efficiency without requiring staff to spend an undue amount of time to get people to comply with some of the basic provisions that we have in some of those different chapters of the municipal code that are touched on here. Chapter 5, Chapter 8, Chapter 14, like I said, Chapter 15. So it's touching on a lot of the different issues that our municipal code addresses, not just the zoning code, which is Title 15. I think that really illustrates that it's a multi-disciplined approach that in some cases touches on our business license people. In other cases, it's zoning, that really comes to bear, our building official. A lot of times it's just our police department and our legal office and so forth. But maybe to try to really paraphrase to wrap up with this, the concept is give somebody a reason to comply quickly and effectively before a significant penalty is imposed. And if they comply, then the penalty is kept at a minimum. If they do not, then the penalty is increased, and the penalty is increased again until...
Does it say anywhere in here how long they've got from first violation to second violation? How long it gives them to get in compliance?
It does. It will take me a second to track that down.
Just wanted to make sure there's something in there.
It says 10 days right here, doesn't it?
10-day notice.
We kicked a lot of different time frames around when we were talking about this, so I could misspeak pretty easily, but 10 days was discussed, certainly. Yeah, so there we see. For example, the proposed changes to Title V, it's on page 4, 10 days there. I think we were striving to be consistent with the different chapters. So, yeah, so I'm seeing under Title 8 as well, top of page 7, 10 days. Also, Title 14, 10 days. So, yep, 10 days.
Where did this, if an alleged violator wants to challenge the violation or otherwise, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, where did that come from? Where did that language? Did you guys pull it from somewhere?
I think it's a constitutional thing, really.
My concern is that so now the city's going to enforce this and they're going to use this language to interpret it. And if someone comes in and wants to say, hey, I have I think my reasons are reasonable why I didn't violate the ordinance. Depending on whoever is answering them, say maybe from the city, who maybe you catch them at a bad time, whatever, they say, oh, fine, you have a Class C misdemeanor, you're going to court. I don't want to talk to you. You're challenging it. I have the right to send you to court. That's kind of my concern, that they don't have an administrative way to challenge or discuss the violation in a reasonable manner. I understand if they're belligerent or something like that. So that's my concern with that language.
So Joseph, you'd like to have a provision that would allow them to talk to someone else in the city, possibly a city manager or somebody like that?
There may some administrative process.
Isn't that how it's already stated in the second part, or otherwise does not want to resolve the matter administratively?
Well, or otherwise does not want to resolve the matter administratively. As a layperson, I could interpret that to mean, you mean he doesn't want to pay the fine
Doesn't want to admit guilt.
and pay the fine?
Yeah.
That's all that means to me as a layperson reading it, potentially.
Yeah, the administrative remedy is pay the fine and fix it.
Yeah.
Right? That's
So,
it.
yeah,
And
or otherwise does
avoid
not want to
further-
resolve the matter administratively means they don't want to pay the fine.
Versus having an opportunity for like an administrative hearing.
Yeah, or
Somebody
some
that's-
administrative process where if that maybe someone else can hear it. And, oh yeah, you must have caught Sally on the wrong day. You know.
Yeah.
Who knows? But maybe that's too much.
We can certainly bring that up. I'd be bringing it up with our legal counsel to see.
Sure.
But at some point in time, you've got to do something. In my experience as a contractor and with dealing with things like this, you give too many little loopholes to go through and they will extend you as long as they can before they pay a $100 fine. You know, when you go into something and you say, I will perform this, or I will forfeit a bond, or whatever this may be, and in this case, you know, if they are aware that if I don't perform this by this date, I am subjecting myself to these penalties, it's spelled out. And so I don't have a problem with saying, hey, there it is. And if they have an exception to that, they do have an administrative, according to what it says there. They could go to someone and say, you know, there's extenuating circumstances or whatever. And that,
Yeah, the sign was posted behind that tree that the inspector didn't look at. Things like that happen.
yeah, they happen.
And by the way, here's our camera proving it. Oh, you're challenging me. You have a Class C misdemeanor.
I think the thing is that it's gone from having tons of leeway to needing to firm up the leeway.
That's what I'm getting at too, is that at some point in time, you either comply or it costs you money. And I guarantee you that costing you money is a way to get you to comply.
You and I agree.
If you decide that if you're gonna seek legal remedies, it's gonna cost you a lot more than $100.
I like that it says violation and not automatic misdemeanor as well.
Right.
That's a great change.
So anyway, that's my statement. So I don't have a problem with the way it's written.
Does this need to have
I have one thing that we talked about if anybody followed the emails. I'd like to strike horses from the language on the meat processing.
I'm okay with that as well.
I agree with that.
And we talked about that a little bit. We didn't make it clear, and I think we left it hanging out there, and I was one of them that left it hanging out there. Because I am familiar with people who raise horses and they have a need to have somewhere where they can take a horse that has lived its life and now you need to take care of a horse that's suffering or whatever. Right now the remedy isn't good, you know, there's not any options for that person other than to dispose of the animal on their own property at their own expense. But in the case of horses, it brings up a lot of emotions with people. And my concern is that right now in the state of Utah, there is no one in the state of Utah that processes horses. Don't know why.
For human consumption specifically, right?
I don't know of anybody that kills horses, period. I don't know that I don't know of anybody.
Isn't a slaughterhouse for human consumption?
That's the whole concept.
Because I was just quickly reading it.
But here's the issue. Here's the issue is that if we leave horses in there, there's somebody, and I know of somebody that may say, I'm not making any more trips to Arizona to get rid of these horses, or to Mexico. According to what is in Title 15 in Spanish Fork City, I can build my own little facility and kill horses once every 2 weeks, and we'll be okay. What they do with that meat, you know, it could be for human consumption, it could be for processing for pet food, it could be made into fertilizer for all we care. But my fear is that if we leave horses in that ordinance, someone is going to take advantage of that and say, we're going to process horses in Spanish Fork.
For whatever it's worth? I'm super comfortable.
Yeah, let's take it out.
Yeah, because it doesn't preclude them from coming to Spanish Fork City if they really want to do that and say, we would like to process horses. Can we go ahead and go through the steps to get a processing facility here, and then they can go through the steps. But let's not leave that door open.
So what I was asking Dr. Google during part of your presentation. It was a great presentation, thank you. And it's a little gray whether or not it's legal in the US, and it seems pretty clear that there is no government funding available for inspections related to horse slaughtering, which is a way of them trying to prohibit it.
Keep it out of the food.
And so I'd be interesting, the city attorney might, if they're bored, they could research that. But in the meantime, we'll just strike it and hope that the city council also strikes it.
That would be my proposal.
Let's move into public hearing. Is that all right at this point? Okay, so we're going to move into public hearing on the Title 15 amendments. If there's anyone here that would like to speak.
She's waited so patiently.
You are so I am it. My name is Millie Oplenop, and we just purchased a property on 1262 Depot Road, and the slaughterhouse will be in my backyard. So instead of trees, I will have a slaughterhouse blocking my view of the mountain. But that's all good because we met with the slaughterhouse people last week, and I feel like they're pretty sincere on wanting to be good neighbors, and we'll be able to work with them to get that all situated and all worked out. So it's all good. My main complaint is that the title amendments were not in public notification the first time, and I think I made the county and the city aware of that the first time. I was disappointed to see when it came out, I think on the 31st or the 23rd of June, that it just says title amendments, but it doesn't give specific what those title amendments are. It says changes to the text, but it doesn't say what are the title amendments that are being made. So some of these things.
You're saying the public notice.
Right, the public notice I feel wasn't it wasn't specific enough for the public to know like what is happening, because I haven't even seen any of this. I knew about the meat processing facility amendment, but like the grain mill, the feedlot, unless someone has been here attending the meetings, the public doesn't know about these other changes to the amendment. So I have a journalist background, and so I want to know who, what, when, where, why in these amendments, so the public is more aware of what's going on here in the Zoning and Planning Commission, as well as in the city council meetings. That's just my thoughts.
Good feedback, thank you.
My other concern was that, you're worried about trees. I think some of the reasons why the residents of Spanish Fork City, especially the older ones that have been here, I've lived in Spanish Fork for 25 years. I raised my family here. Is that there is, we came to Spanish Fork because we love the agriculture. I have horses, and I totally agree with, striking horses from that ordinance, because I think there is a legal issue as well. And there is an emotional component to putting your horse down. So that you also consider that you keep agricultural spaces, because one, they're needed for hay. Like hay prices with the drought are going up. I think right now I've seen it on Facebook, like a 3x8 bale of hay is about over $200 right now, where before it's been around $100 a bale. So that puts a lot of people that have horses, like they have to sell their animals because they can't afford to feed them. And when you are developing large acres of land for new developments, then some of that feed goes away, and it also increases prices of hay and all that for the farmers. I know there was a gentleman in the last city council meeting that stood up and said how needed the meat packing facility was, because he had to ship his cows to Nebraska to have them processed, and then they had to bring the meat back. But if you there's more development going on in Spanish Fork and in Utah County, then I'll have to buy hay from Nebraska and have it shipped out. So I just would ask you to be considerate of the agriculture and Spanish Fork as well, because a lot of us older residents are prideful of that, and that's why we live here. We, if we wanted to live in multi-development housing and townhomes and all of that, then we'd go live in Provo and Orem.
So I just wanted to make that comment. I appreciate the time.
So, just to reemphasize, you'd like, when it comes to public hearings, just more specific detail as to what the public hearing is about.
Right.
And then the other one is, we live in Spanish Fork, try and preserve as much as the ag as we can.
Yeah.
And get rid of horses on there, she said too.
And
Yeah,
scratch
strike the
horses.
horses. That, yeah, I was gonna
Did
bring
we
that
miss
up, but I
any?
thought, well, like, I don't know. Yeah, the horses, there is an emotional component. I've had to put a couple horses down, and there is no place to take them, and you can drag them to Cooney's, you know, in your horse trailer or whatnot, but, or you can, you know, secretly bury them in your backyard, but not in city land, but it's in the county. But,
So you're living in the house that's just across the tracks?
right,
Big white house?
right.
That's where the horse skeletons are, John.
No, actually,
The property you just bought.
yeah, it's a
That you
property
just
we just
bought.
bought. Yeah, we're not there yet. We're doing improvements to the house before we move in. But my horses are actually in that last subdivision that you were talking about. My horses are just down the road to the north. We're keeping them. It's in the county. It's on about 8 acres, and you know, that's another concern is that you know, crossing Highway 6. That always scares me when I have to cross that railroad track like 2 or 3 times a day because I go out there and feed my horses and then come back.
We're at here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so where that orchard is,
Okay.
right up there, yeah, that's where I have my horses right now, and when we move in, then I'll move them down to Depot Road. But yeah, this road is like a concern, and especially with all of the new subdivisions going in, like where are all those people going to come in and out?
Do we,
There's a plan for a
yeah, Mike, do we
stoplight,
know?
a traffic light.
Do we know where we're at with UDOT or anybody on the
I
road
don't know
changes there?
timing. If you have more timing than I do.
It has not been discussed with them recently. It's going to have to get worse before it gets better, is unfortunately part of the same story. I am certain that once they start seeing rooftops go in, the developments that I mentioned tonight, that will get their attention. But it's a little bit more expensive of a project than just adding the stoplight, and Mike's describing that, you know, where it will be
Part of the
Because you're doing away with the
closure
light
of
here.
that access, relocating it, building a new one, and so forth. Which, not being said, they've taken a big step towards that with the improvements that they've made on the north side of 6. But we definitely recognize that, and for whatever this is worth, Powerhouse Road, where it ties into US 6, this also being, you know, an intersection that desperately needs improvements. This one will be improved next year.
Oh,
So we do have a plan
Signal.
for that.
Nice.
really?
Yeah.
That's my road.
I don't have to risk my life turning left out of there every time again.
That's needed for a long,
Yeah,
long time.
It's scary.
Yeah.
Well,
It is.
My car has horsepower. That's the only thing that gets me there.
But,
Otherwise, it's scary.
Horsepower.
yeah, there's not, it's
A
not going to
horse.
be fixed.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Anything else? Okay, thank you for your comments.
Could we pull up your house real quick?
Yeah.
Just, and I've got a couple questions for you.
FYI on UDOT, they very rarely build in advance, if you've never realized that from the freeway and other things. But they will say there's not enough cars here today to warrant it to build X number of years away. So very rarely, like, we have to present, this is a big problem before we typically get some movement.
Can you start presenting that as a big problem now? And then just like
Absolutely.
presenting traffic counts that are just accurate?
Predicted.
We showed them plans for approved developments. They
Good.
see that, they're
The
aware.
thing
Oh,
that I
good.
think is crazy is that they don't have a very clear sign saying that right lane is going away before you go up the canyon, just as you're going around the corner. That is so,
Yeah.
that's egregious to me.
It's scary
Yeah.
to like cross that.
I often
But-
get merged with a diesel.
Yeah.
They forget and they're like, oh, I need to go up the canyon, so,
Yep.
yeah.
And you're
Anyway.
smaller than them. I've just got a basic question for you on your place there. We're close.
Yeah.
So, if you'd show us on the map.
So
Pointer.
it's,
Right
yes,
there.
yep, that's it right there. Yep.
And so, how much do you own that or will you own, I guess you do own that
There's almost
entire
about 9
field?
acres there. Yeah. There's almost 9 acres there.
Okay.
And so,
And are you currently in the city or are you in the?
No, it is zoned county. The previous owners were approached about like incorporating into the city, but they said no. And I think for right now, I think that's also our wish. But maybe later, I don't know. We'll have to see. But yeah, so the meatpacking plant's gonna go in like right there.
Well, it'll be on the south side of the tracks, right?
Yeah, it is just in my backyard. Yeah, so I do have concerns about that, like the noise, the smell, all of that, but we did talk to the meatpacking people last week about it. We met with them separately, and they were very nice, very sincere gentlemen, so they do want to be good neighbors, and so I think that we can work some of that out.
I just thought it'd be okay with you guys to show exactly where she's talking about there.
Yeah, it's like, it's our dream home, really. It's our dream property. We're just so excited to like be there and have some property of our own, just so we can have horses and
It's awesome.
raise the rest of our family and grandchildren there. So.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any additional discussion?
Any other public comments?
Oh,
No?
that's right. Thank you. Okay, seeing no additional public comment, we will move out of public. Commissioners have any additional comments? I think we know what we need to change, right? Just that one change.
No horses.
Okay, I would entertain a motion.
I would put forward a motion, or I would motion that.
I move.
Thank you. Not I like, right? I move that we recommend the changes to Title 15 amendments as recommended by staff, and striking horse from the language.
Got a motion
Second it.
and a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
I do like the idea, though, of putting,
I took it all as
The legal motion, is that what you're talking about, Brandon? Yeah, I kind of
It's all together, yeah.
included that all. At least that's the way I looked at it.
I like the idea of putting the general idea of what the changes are for,
Over the years, we've done more. We can't do less than we do now, right? That's about as safe as you can get. And we've consistently, I think, defaulted back to less, just because inevitably we leave something out, as we try to, maybe give an executive summary of what the changes are, that type of a thing, where we're touching on multiple topics and stuff like that. Now,
Do you
I mean, to
provide
make
a link?
excuses, and certainly we can do more than we've done now, certainly, so.
Does the notice have a link to the staff report?
At some point in time, it does.
Usually probably 2 or 3 days prior, she would have been able to see it.
What's the notice that, for example, what would she have received as far as the notice goes?
Among other things, we are required to provide notice on a website that the state of Utah maintains for any legislative acts like changes to our zoning code.
Okay.
So there's that. I think that's probably the main.
Yeah, it's just a public notice website.
Yeah.
You can go and sign up for any notifications from like the city council, your DRC, like any type of meeting in the city that you want. And so then it will send you notifications when your agenda comes out. So that was on the agenda, but that's all the agenda said was Title 15 amendments, which is what?
There's a lot.
Is there a law or a time frame that the city has to have the agenda attached to prior
Brown
to
Act.
the meeting?
The Brown Act, yeah.
24 hours.
24 hours.
Is it possible, and I don't know if it is or not, that's why I asked the question. You see the public hearing notices on the streets where things are taking place. How difficult would it be to include a QR code that somebody could pull out their phone, and it takes them exactly to the Title 15 changes?
We've explored that,
Okay.
and I think that's a great idea. That seems to be a fairly customary way for people to
That's a cool
access
idea.
information.
Technology, right?
Yeah, like the way you pulled up menus
But
at
that
restaurants
would-
during COVID, right? So it's
Typically,
cool. Yeah.
with that, there's not a change to zoning text, that's just a map amendment. right, when people see signs.
Yeah.
So they, for example, I mean, the notice that we provide on signs is
for a
very
piece of
succinct as
property.
well.
Yeah.
Right, typically it says, like, changing the zoning from rural residential to R18.
Be
or
nice.
something like that, but they could access a staff report perhaps.
Yes, yeah, staff report, it'd be awesome if there were a QR code that not only, that was adjusted or adapted as preliminary plats came out for that piece of property. And maybe it's not a public notice sign, maybe it's here's what the city's looking at for this piece of property. You can scan this QR code and follow along with what is happening.
But if you have just a couple of things on the public notice, so that if somebody's glancing at it, they can say, then they have the heads up that they need to go and scan the QR code.
Thinking more about the sign, that type of thing, or some other kind of notice.
Just if they look at the public website, I mean.
At the
just-
website.
Or the sign, or, yeah.
This is one of the hazards of technology, is that we've moved forward and we talk about being able to access all this thing with your phone and boom, wham, there it is. But unfortunately, humans are lazy and we don't follow through with a lot of things. You know, we see a sign and go, oh, all right, well, you know, and you think, oh crap, that's already gone. You know, it wasn't that many years ago that things had to be advertised in the press. The Herald was worthless because if you ever looked at the Herald, the public notices were all about estate sales and stuff like that. And it was hard to go find, whatever was applicable to what you were looking for. But yet in the press, it was a really quick thing that you could see that. If you had a question, a phone call or a visit to city offices, to talk to someone was really easy. Now we're pretty impersonal. Impersonal. And a lot of times we overlook things because, it is, with a stroke of a finger. It's not even a stroke of a pen anymore. And, and so people that are really concerned sometimes never get the notice, never know where to find it. I worked in the state government and know all about these sites and everything else. And, I didn't even keep up with them the way I should have with my job, where I'm in an office for 8 hours a day and looking at those kinds of things. So, they're great if you know your way around things and if you have the technology, and we all do now, we all do with our phones and stuff, but it's just a little difficult for a lot of people to find where they need to get information from.
And we've talked about this before, like how do we get more people involved and how do we make them aware of what's going on in their neighborhoods? Do we create a site that's specific to a development that they can go to and follow along as things come before the planning commission and the city council, and they can kind of see what's happening? Or do we just leave it with they get a public notice if they live within the 500 feet? It'd be nice to be able to, because I drive all over and I see stuff going up, and I'm on the planning commission. Sometimes I forget what's going where. It'd be nice to, and I know where to go to find out, but a lot of people don't.
And it's increasing that transparency so that people know where to go and how to go. That's why I asked the question about how long before is the agenda attached, because then people know, oh, I saw the public notice sign 24 hours in advance. I can see exactly what's there and do that time frame, because it's important that we as a city are increasing that transparency in what we're doing. So
This is not something we've done well over time, and I don't think we're unique. We've defaulted to the minimum requirements of the state code, which again, I don't think is unique at all. I think that's customary practice among cities. We are not staffed to devote a lot of time to keeping the community apprised of what's going on or what might potentially be going on, which I think is really the issue, right? People, being advised, maybe before decisions are made and that type of a thing. We've recognized that as staff that we have an issue. We also recognize that unless we make some staff changes,
It'll
we simply
continue being the
can't
same.
keep up.
There's not
and
man-hours.
It simply is a matter, and again, I don't mean to sound like I'm making excuses, but I don't know exactly how many new applications we receive on, during an average week for new development projects, but it's more than one or two. And as projects go through the approval process, we're seeing more than one or two iterations of those typically. So it simply takes somebody time to keep the information that we do share up to date and accurate. And until we get to the point to where we can do that and make it readily accessible, pretty much real time, I have dragged my feet because I'm almost as concerned about having outdated, incomplete, or otherwise, just information out that's not representative of actually what's, going on or might be going on. Just as concerned about that as not having any information at all. But that being said, we've had a number of conversations very recently about some of the changes that we can make to have somebody devoted to this issue to at least get us, I think, to where we would have information available in the ways that a lot of people expect to get it these days. I appreciate what John said. I used to get some number more phone calls every day than I get now. It's been interesting. Phone call inquiries, questions, and things like that have plummeted. But I get 5 times as many emails as I used to get, and that type of a thing. There's different ways that people pose their questions and different ways that people expect to get information, have access to it, and that type of thing. So, us being able to adjust to that and do better, that's absolutely needed.
Well, and in those good old days where things were put into the press, I used to go into the Spanish Fork Press occasionally and say, why aren't you reporting on this? And J.C. Henderson or Lane Henderson would say, we'll be glad to put it in, you write it, and we'll put it in. Because they didn't have staff to do that. And we're still in the same boat. We used to worry about, well, computers are going to take all of our jobs. It takes a lot more people to maintain computers than it does to type something out on a typewriter. It's just the way it is. It's quicker and faster, but wait until it breaks down. So we're switching gears. We're not really changing directions. We're just shifting gears to another.
It's the same need, it's just a different medium, different expectations.
And it's better in most ways.
So last time we counted, there are 53 developments in process.
53.
Do a lot of work to try and.
45 in construction. Obviously, it changes up and down, but I was curious what it was because we never get a couple a week, but they're in the queue and revisions and things until they're finally in construction. And that number at that point was about 50.
Well, you all need a raise.
It's not rocket science, and it's not hard labor, but it's just having somebody that has the time consistently every day
to do that,
update things as needed and keep current. And
Not to drop another ball, right? All the other things, all the other things that you have going.
That's part of the concern without a doubt.
And you have to pick your poison of what you think is the most valuable to you, or is, at the top of your list of wannabes. In my discussion today with some people about horses that have horses, and it's an issue. But one of them said, so when does the new pool start? See, his wife was all over him, and that's what he said, is that she could care less about the stinking horses that they have to go take care of, and, obviously she doesn't like to ride them. But her concern is that she and her kids are going down to the pool 3 times a week, and we've only got about 6 weeks left in the pool. So he wants to know, well, when's Spanish Fork going to build a pool?
But I've appreciated that there has been online, that the city has worked with their social media to get a pulse and created a survey. I think that's awesome.
It's all, here we go.
All right, I would make a motion that we adjourn.
I second that motion.
Adjourned.
Aye.
Any-